Hey, it's Ian Cantle here from Outsource Marketing. And as usual, we have Ken Tucker, Paul Barthel, and from Chainscape Web, and Jeff Steck from Tylerica Marketing Systems out of Austin, Texas. And we are your marketing guides. Today, we're talking about a really great topic, which is marketing strategy for small businesses. And it's probably one of the most important topics ever covered in relation to marketing. And I wanted to start with a few quotes from some famous people. So Thomas Edison said, "Good fortune is what happens when opportunity meets with planning." And Sun Tzu, the famous strategist, said, "Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, and tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." So, a recent study found that marketers that proactively planned their marketing were 331% more successful than their peers. So, strategic marketing planning is really, really important to your business in order to help you be successful. It also helps you avoid failure, shiny object syndrome, and a whole bunch of other things that we'll talk about today. So today we're going to be taking a deep dive into this topic of marketing strategy for small businesses and how you can leverage the power of strategy in your business to get better results. So I thought it would be helpful to start, first of all, by looking at the importance of marketing strategy. I shared a few things there in the intro, but why is having a marketing strategy so crucial for small businesses? And I'll start with you, Ken.
Well, if 331% better success rate isn't motivation enough, I don't know what to say. So everything else is really kind of after that, I guess. I think for me, it's clarity in who your ideal customers are. That is something, we all hear it all the time. Who's your customer? Anybody that has a roof, anybody that does it. And it's like, no, not really. You've got service areas so that you don't go everywhere, right? You don't work with people that don't own their own homes, maybe, as an example. So there are qualifications that you actually have, right? So you don't want to waste money sending postcards to an apartment complex if you're not going to serve that apartment complex. I mean, it just, so dialing in the ideal client, I think, is critical. And it's a great first step because it gives you clarity and an understanding of who you serve. And then you can start to explore, where are they hanging out? Where are they spending time? What are the channels that are going to be the most effective to be able to get to them? And, and then once you kind of get that piece in place, you want to have a clear message. You want to make it crystal clear what it is you do, and you want to make it really easy for people to understand what they need to do to engage with your business. So if you're, since I kind of started off on roofing, maybe because we had a bunch of hail in our area recently, if you're doing a roofer, I forgot what I was going to say. I distracted myself because I was looking out the window thinking about all this hail we had. So what was I don't remember what I was saying. Anyway, clear message. You want people to schedule an estimate. That's the call to action, right now. And chances are they may need to schedule it quickly. And you, because of the urgency of the situation where people are like, I got some pretty nasty hail, I probably ought to get somebody out here to take a look pretty quickly. You might need to step on the gas pedal and, do some paid ads, or, do old school knocking on doors if that works and that's acceptable in the neighborhoods that you're going to, but again, if you don't know who that ideal customer is, or if they're even outside of your natural service area, do you want to waste that money? Because it's probably going to be largely wasted. You might still make money on the overall ad spend or marketing investment because of, the profitability of your deal. Your particular business may be okay, but you're wasting a lot of money. And most money, most marketing is, honestly, it's just pissing away money. because it doesn't have the strategy and the thinking behind it to make it the most effective that it could be. That still doesn't mean that it doesn't add a lot of value to your business. In many cases, it still can. But think about if you ratcheted it down and really laser focused it, how much further you would get ahead. So I'll stop there and let Jeff and Paul kind of jump in.
Yeah. And I know each of us could talk about this all day, so I appreciate you passing the baton. So Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to totally support everything Ken just said, and I maybe would even back up a little as I was thinking about this question when you proposed it. It made me worth hitting just a minute on the difference between strategy and tactics. A lot of times when businesses come to me and they say, we want you to work on their marketing, we want to run some Google ads and we need a social media presence. And those are tactics. That's not a strategy. The strategy is, we're going to talk more in detail about it in another question. But really fundamentally, the strategy piece is, who do you want to reach? What do you want to tell them? And what do you want them to do? Right? You're not talking about where, you're not talking about how often, you're not talking about ad spends, you're not doing any of that yet. It's the fundamentals of who are you trying to reach. And Ken said, I pick on realtors. It sounds like he had roofers in mind, but anybody who has a roof. Okay, great. That's most of the people in the country, and it's going to be, we can reach them all, and it's going to be very expensive. Change that up with, I want to reach homeowners in St. Louis that have asphalt shingle roofs. That's a very different proposition, very different for how you reach them and what you tell them. And then, of course, what you tell them comes into play. But the strategy part is crucial, because until you know that, you can't be efficient. You can't target appropriately. You can't put messaging out there that will compel people to take action and bring them to your business, or at least not efficiently. You can do it in a very broad-based approach, but it's going to be the Sun Tzu quote. It's going to be the slow march to victory. The tactics only are going to be the noise before defeat, right? If you just start throwing tactics out, you're going to waste a lot of money. If you have a strategy, then you're going to be able to implement tactics around it. So they go hand in hand, but the strategy's got to come first. And Ken, that was my moment to kind of distract myself right there, thinking about the Sun Tzu quote. So yeah, I guess we all get one in on the podcast, right? But yeah, the strategy is crucial, and everything else falls out of it. All the efficiencies, the optimization of resources, all the things we can talk about kind of fall out of knowing who you want to reach, what you want to tell them, and what you want them to do.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Great stuff, Jeff. What about you, Paul?
Well, kind of going off what Jeff just said, that strategy is what defines your tactics. Because like Jeff said, if you're just throwing stuff out there, you don't know what works. And one thing about strategy helps keep you focused on the tactics and what are the right tactics. And strategy also, it can help you define your brand recognition. A lot of small businesses don't even think about brand recognition. People have to know you exist, and if they don't know you exist, they might accidentally find you with a Google search or something. But it helps you maintain consistency, and it helps you stay focused, and that's going to define your tactics. And Jeff was talking about Google ads, and everybody wants to do Google ads, but that might not be the right thing for you, because if you're in a competitive market where your competitors are spending a lot of money, let's say your competitors are spending $2,000-$3,000 a month on Google ads, and you don't have that budget, that may not be the right tactic for you, because you're just not going to be competitive. So I think strategy helps define what you're going to do. And I think both Ken and Jeff basically said that, but strategy is important.
Yeah. And can one of you just talk about one of the things I love about strategy discussions and doing marketing strategy with clients is the alignment of your strategic marketing goals that support your business goals. Can you guys, someone pick up that baton and run with it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking is, Jeff and Paul were talking is, you know, a lot of people try to do a lot of things, and they have, you know, first of all, specificity is your best friend when it comes to search engine optimization. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier to go rank for the phrases that are most important for you. But on the business side, how do you connect marketing strategy to business goals and objectives? You know, you've got to understand, what are your most profitable products? Who are your most beneficial customers? Do they buy more from you more often? Do they refer you? You know, and if they do, around what products? And you know, a great example is to optimize your Google business profile. Now, this is a tactic, but I think it illustrates the point. If you don't know your strategy and your most important product or service, chances are you're going to pick the wrong primary business category for your Google business profile. Well, guess what? If you pick a different one, 80% of your sales and, along one of the most profitable lines of business that you have, you may not be showing up on the Google Maps results for, because you picked the wrong category. So you've got to understand, what are the drivers that generate profit in your business. And if you don't understand the business lines that you have and how to prioritize those and how that feeds, and they need to interact, your marketing strategy needs to support those best, products and services that drive the most revenue for your business. Yeah, again, assuming that it's the work you like to do. I mean, if it's highly profitable, but you can't keep employees because they hate it, then you need to know that too, right? Because you can put the best marketing strategy in place, but you're going to fail because you can't literally deliver, around that nature of that business. So I think it's absolutely critical. And I think too many businesses skip the step. They want to market everything equally. I do siding, I do windows, I do roofs, I do decks, I do fences, I mow lawns, I cook for people. Okay, great. All of that's on your website. Fantastic. You're going to have to pick winners and losers to invest in from a marketing perspective, or you're going to dilute everything to the point where it's completely ineffective.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
Not only do they want to market everything equally, they usually don't have the budget to market everything equally. And, we see that with Google Ads a lot. Going back to Google Ads, it's like, okay, I have 7 different services I offer, and I want to run Google Ads for all 7 services. And by the way, I have $500 a month. Well, that's not going to work. Pick one. And
but the problem is, somebody will take your money. Somebody out there will take your money to do exactly what you ask. So, because you have tool vendors out there, and they're going to do what they can do to make a buck that's good for them, not good for you.
Mm-hmm. I think going back to your question of the strategy related to marketing goals, relating to business goals, I think the strategy informs the tactics, right? Which tactics we use are going to be determined by the strategy. And then you can start driving budgets and how to meet the business goals given available budgets. Will the budgets be enough or not? I did an analysis once for a business that wanted to sign up a small number of clients. They were willing to spend a fair amount of money to do it, and they wanted to use Facebook. And I did the backwards analysis and said, well, you're going to have to probably spend about twice as much as your budget allows, just because of the funnel, the natural fallout at every stage along the way of no like trust down to signing a contract. So their initial business goals of growth could not be supported by their budget for the marketing with the tactics they had. So we went back to the strategy and said, well, where do these people get their information? What are they wanting to do? Where do they respond? And is there a different way to do it? And we could build a different approach. Similarly, I consulted with a business that was doing very, very well. They're a manufacturing company. They're doing very, very well in a specific aspect of manufacturing focused toward the oil and gas industry. And they said, well, gee, these tools we have, the machinery, the equipment, what we can produce can apply equally as well to aerospace industry or chemical processing plants, pharmaceutical industry. And how do we broaden that out? Well, the people they're trying to reach, it's a little different profile, a little different message, the personas. So you can start talking about, from a strategic point of view, how do you reach these different audiences? Where do they get their information? And what are you going to tell them? And then that can inform the prioritization of which of those markets to go after. It can inform the budgets needed for each of those markets to go after. And you start blending the two together, right? Does the marketing with the available budgets generate the business required to meet the business goals that then free up the budget for, feeding that machine, spinning up that flywheel? So yeah, they go hand in hand, and the strategy informs everything that follows after it. And then there's that feedback loop into it as well of, is what we're doing working, and is it generating the results we want that then allow us to continue to expand?
Awesome. And do you guys find, so I think one of the really important metrics that businesses should have, and it's not, it is marketing related, but it doesn't have to be, right? Especially if they're kind of old school and they live off of referrals and word of mouth and that kind of stuff. But even there, they should know this. And that is, first of all, what's the lifetime value of a customer or client? And then the other one is the cost of acquiring a new client, patient, customer. When you guys are consulting with businesses, how often do you see businesses having that kind of information already prepared when they're talking to you? Is it rare, or are you finding a lot of businesses have that kind of information at their disposal?
I wouldn't say prepared. I think they have a sense of it, but they haven't really gone through the formal exercise to determine it. And when you start digging a little deeper, sometimes they've got a really good sense, and sometimes it's just a thumb in the wind. But that, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's part of the whole discussion is, we want to land a client. What's the client worth in the long term? I mean, you work a lot with dentists and orthodontists, and even between those two, it's a different lifetime value proposition, right? If somebody has their teeth straightened, they don't need to have their teeth straightened every year for the next 50 years. But somebody that has their teeth cleaned is going to have them cleaned twice a year for the next 50 years and beyond, right? So yeah, there's all kinds of different value propositions that inform the decisions of how to get things done, and what makes sense from a marketing budget and a client acquisition cost.
And that's because my experience is that most people take a wild ass guess at what it is. And because that they can't properly set a marketing budget, which can be a real challenge. So I think it's critical, but you've got to be able to make economic sense of the investment that you're making. Not always. I mean, sometimes you need to do something to just get it done, and you need to kind of, plow through, and maybe it's a break-even scenario. But if that's the case, you need to know it even more. So.
You bring up a good point, Ken. I mean, there's something to be said for, not getting caught up in analysis paralysis and just, try a few things and get it out there, but try it at a lower level experiment. And sometimes those experiments can actually lead to gathering more information, more data that will support refining the strategy. So it's an iterative process in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
I remember, Perry Marshall, when he wrote, was it 80-20 sales and marketing, right? He actually ran Google Ads to determine which would be the best title for that book, because he had several possibilities and he wanted to see what people would respond to. So while he was doing the upfront planning and the strategy of how am I going to write this book, who's it going to be for, how are we going to roll it out, the title wasn't yet known, and he threw a little bit of money behind Google Ads to experiment and figure that out. So yeah, there is low-hanging fruit to go after, and not waiting 6 months for the strategy, but that's low-hanging fruit, and playing around with a smaller budget than going all in, and then in 6 months going, well, we kind of blew it. Now what do we do? So yeah, it's not an all or none. It's not a left or right. It's definitely strategy first, but don't let strategy completely hold you back from hitting things that need to be hit on early on either.
Jeff, that's a great point. I'm a big fan of finding a low-hanging fruit item or two to fuel and fund the ongoing marketing investment. So if you're working with somebody who doesn't understand marketing strategy and the breadth of solutions that are out there, the different channels, the different levers you can pull, things like that, chances are they're going to sell you a tactic, which if you've got limited money to kind of bootstrap and kind of fund, generate some revenue to really fund your true marketing strategy and eventual plan, if you spend the wrong money on the wrong tactic, you've just shot yourself in the foot, and you've created massive opportunity lost costs, because now you've kicked the can down the road even further than what it initially was. And so if you're working with somebody that's like, oh yeah, we're Facebook ads expert, they're going to sell you Facebook ads. And like you said, that may not be the right channel, or the investment that you spend isn't enough to really generate what you need to get out of that program. So you're not fueling the engine. You're burning off the gas that you have in your tank, and you're not going to have any more to invest anywhere else.
Yeah. And I just wanted to jump in. I find that business owners' perception of doing a marketing strategy, they think that just like large businesses have, these focus groups, these teams that take forever to build strategies. That's not my experience. That's not your guys' experience, right? Like I know from, the training that we've gone through and the systems and processes that we use, that strategy can be done very, very quickly. It doesn't need to be an onerous process. It does take collaboration between the marketing consultant or agency and the business owner, for sure, and oftentimes some of the business's teams. But if people can make decisions quickly, and if you bring best practices to the table, those strategies can be developed very quickly, and the measurement mechanisms put in place so that you actually know if the strategy and the following tactics are working really well, really quickly. So I just wanted to kind of let people know that when we talk strategy, our idea of a good marketing strategy doesn't need to take 6 months to develop, right? You don't need to put your business on hold while you're spending tons and tons of time and money to build out a good strategy.
Right.
Let's move on to the next section, which is talking about key components of a marketing strategy. So we've touched on a few, but let's dig a little bit deeper in this so that our listeners and viewers understand really some of the powerful components that would be a part of a marketing strategy. So what are some of the key components of a successful marketing strategy? And Ken, why don't we start with you again?
Okay. So core message, ideal clients, defining customer personas so that you know where they're likely getting their information so that you can put the information in front of them in the most cost-effective manner. Those are probably the three big things that I would latch on to.
And I know because of your work with StoryBrand, just expand a little bit more on what you mean, and this is duct tape marketing stuff as well, but expand a little bit more on what you mean about core message, just in case people don't understand what that is.
Yeah, well, I love StoryBrand because the thing that I think is really overlooked by way too many people is looking at the problems that you really are solving for your ideal customers. And so you may solve a lot of problems for a lot of different types of people, but you're going to get the best conversion rates when you align a customer type or an ideal customer persona with a problem that they really have that is causing them pain, where they need to get some remedy of that. And if you can position yourself as the guide that helps them solve that problem, you're going to be positioned really well to capture that business. How do you do that? Well, you've got to understand the problem. I love the three dimensions that StoryBrand talks about: the internal, external, and philosophical. And the example I always use is just because it resonates with me, but I think it speaks to almost everybody who ever has had to go to a dentist. And that is the external problem is I've got a toothache. Okay, so I've got this existential problem that's physically causing me pain. I've got to take action. The internal problem is every time I go to the dentist, it's just highly stressful, or it's very painful, or, you know, something like that, that, you know, is really the hidden gem. People may start their searches with a description of the external problem, but they're going to refine that, and they're going to actually buy from the person that speaks to their internal problem of, oh, hey, you know what? We offer stress-free dentistry or pain-free dentistry. Oh, really? Tell me more. You know, and so I might dig into the website. I might see a couple of customer testimonials, you know, and then I'm likely to pick up the phone and call them. The reality is, you know, we're in 2024. We've got some pretty sophisticated technologies. Surely it's possible to have pain-free dentistry, right? Or stress-free dentistry, or whatever it is. So if you want, you know, if you're a dentist and you want to create a spa-like environment where people come in and they're very relaxed, and you've got soothing music and even videos to watch for them and stuff like that, I suppose. I don't work with dentists, but, you know, I'm kind of visualizing what that might be. And I'm sure you can talk about that. Yeah, exactly. If I see that information on your website, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I want to do this. I hate going to the dentist, but here's one. Maybe it actually won't be a horrible experience. Maybe it'll actually be fairly enjoyable. And yet, you know what? If it is, I'm probably going to tell a bunch of people. So if you understand the internal problem and how you can solve that problem, it's going to help you convert more people. It's going to help you from an SEO perspective, because there will be a certain number of people who won't just start their search with, I got to find a dentist. They're going to start their search with, I need to find a dentist that specializes in pain-free dentistry.
Yeah.
And that's
and
going
if
to be
I can ask you another probing question related to that is, we know this, but I don't think every business does, is that a good core message also includes a good core difference from your competitors. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that means from a strategic standpoint?
Yeah. I don't know that I don't see it necessarily as positioning yourself differently from somebody else, because honestly, if you spend the time and effort to clarify your message, to really focus on solving the problem that your ideal customer has, you're probably already differentiated to a large degree. What I think is a little bit more important than that is, you know, talking about the cost of inaction. So you can continue to have a toothache that may turn into a much bigger issue down the road, or you can come in and enjoy our spa-like environment, and, you know, we take care of you and solve your problem now, so that you can avoid these horrible outcomes and instead get back to enjoying your life and enjoying a gorgeous 70 to 80 degree day with low humidity in the Midwest, which is unheard of this time of the year. Which is it? You know, that's the power.
I like how you just brought in a weather report at the same time. That's awesome.
So,
I expect the same from you, Jeff.
It's getting freaking hot. That's the official Texas term for it. Freaking hot here. So, you know, I think the core message of difference, brand promise is another term you'll sometimes hear. They're not always exactly the same thing, but they're all very closely related. What it comes down to is, you know, why would somebody want to do business with you? I think Ken just laid out a good case. I think sometimes businesses don't necessarily know what that is. They need some help to get there. And sometimes it takes talking to some of their current customers. So for businesses that are up and running, I think you all operate the same way I do. If we're doing a strategy project with them, one of the things we'll ask is to interview some of their existing clients. And we're specifically looking for those kinds of things. We're, of course, looking to gather information that helps to identify the client persona, but we're also looking for things that we hear the client say about the business might not even realize they do. And here's why it's important. As soon as you can seize on something like that enough people mention as being of real value, you've got something you can build on in terms of differentiating the business, in terms of marketing them then. And the reason you need to have something to build on, something that's different, is what's left if you can't differentiate. It's price. And the saying about competing on prices, it's a race to the bottom. Somebody's always willing to go out of business faster than you. So I think that aspects of the strategy of if you can't say why we're different, how we're different, you can talk about what you do differently or the experience that people are going to get. It's like goes back to Ken's point. But I think that's a critical part of being able to successfully market the business and pull out in front of the pack, in a competitive marketplace. If you're in a small town and you're the only service provider there, you don't need to do as much differentiation, right? But if you're in a bigger town where it's very competitive, you're competing to get people's attention. You need to be able to do that. One of the things I also want to add.
Can I just support that?
Yeah.
There's a story that you guys probably all know about, but it was something that John Jantz from Duct Tape Marketing shared years and years ago, and it really proved the point of what you were saying about the differentiation. Was he was working with a tree removal arborist, and after they did the customer interviews, the biggest thing that came out of their interviews was that these guys cleaned up after themselves so that backyards, front yards were pristine. And there weren't like pieces of wood, that a kid could step on or, whatever. Right. So that really stuck out to me as a really good example that, you can hinge your core difference on something as mundane as we clean up really well after ourselves. Right. And I've seen that now year after year with a lot of other contractors, because some contractors are notorious for leaving their job sites a disaster. And the ones that clean it up and they talk about that is a huge selling point. But I just wanted to share that because I think that's a really powerful way it's used. Yeah.
It's hard to demonstrate value when you have no differentiation. And value, like you said, Jeff, value is what allows you to escape competing on price. You may still find yourself in some situations where you're competing on price, and you may choose to do that because of the potential follow-on business and things like that. But most people, I think, they're trying to find a way to get off the hamster wheel if they're stuck on that, by competing on price all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's also the we have better service, right? Well, okay, define that. Prove it. How do you define that?
Excellent customer service.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to add to the components of marketing strategy, and I think you hit on it a little bit, Ken. Of course, it's who you're trying to reach. What do you want to tell them? But I think I mentioned it earlier. What action do you want them to take? And you don't always see that in the academics of marketing. You don't always see that in even maybe what some other consultants or agencies will talk about. But I'm very big on talking about the how are you going to lead people down the path you want to lead them down. Give them an action to take, because if you're not doing that, you're just telling stories, and stories are great. I mean, for StoryBrand, Ken, stories are great. They're engaging. They're powerful. They can make an emotional connection. But at the end of the day, at the end of the story, if you haven't asked somebody to do something next, you've just told a story and entertained them for 2 minutes. So I think bringing in, and I know we're going to talk again in a minute about the practical applications, but bringing in, that path you want to lead them down, how to lead them down, give them an action to take, I think is a very important part that even can be brought up into the strategy piece as you're doing those client interviews, as you're kind of mapping out how things are going to work at the very high level before you get into all the tactics. You can be thinking about the path and what you want people to ultimately do.
Yeah, and usually as businesses, we have an ultimate call to action, right? We want people to phone us, fill in a form, maybe
buy our stuff,
else, right? That's right. Wire us money, or come into our brick and mortar location. But then there's, like, as you probe, there's usually what we would call like a transitional call to action, which is something that has a lot less, like, you as the consumer or business don't need to give as much information, so there's less risk to you, but you still get value. There's a value exchange of some kind. So and I great point, Jeff. Paul, what about you?
What about me? What did I do?
what are some key components to the marketing strategy that you want to share? And I'm not sure what you did.
Well, we're going to find out now.
I'm not either.
It's why he's hiding his face today.
I think about the only thing I would add, we talked about differentiation and what makes you different from your competitor. Why should they choose you? We talked about strategies and tactics. But I think the one thing is it helps you define the customer journey, because the customer journey is not linear. It's not like, okay, I ran an ad, wherever that ad is. Somebody clicked on my ad. They buy my product or service. That's not how it works. It is and the longer the buying cycle is, because if you're selling a $2 widget, there probably is no buyer journey. If you're selling a $50,000 product or service, you're going to have a longer buyer journey, and the longer that buyer journey is, the more convoluted that journey is, because you're asking someone to spend, we have a client that does hardy siding. You're asking someone to spend $50,000. They are not going to, oh, hey, look, here's an ad for hardy siding. Here, I'm going to immediately spend $50,000 without knowing anything about this company. That's not going to happen. They're going to research you. They're going to research your competitors. By the time they actually contact you, we've talked about this in the past, they've probably eliminated 10 different companies and you're on the short list. So that it helps define that customer journey, because you have to know what that customer journey is, where they're going, how they're researching, and you need to be at all those touch points, so to speak, and you have to stay top of mind with them. So I think that's the biggest thing I'd add, is that customer journey, the longer your buying cycle, the longer the buying cycle is for your potential customers, the more important it is to understand that customer journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ian, I think you were also kind of implying with your question, maybe what are some of the deliverables to expect from a marketing strategy type of an engagement? And a couple of things that we haven't really hit on. One is competitive research. That also is going to help you define your differentiation, but it's also going to see how steep a hill you may have to climb in certain regards, or uncover all kinds of opportunities that are available out there. So competitor research is really important. And then the other element of that is, after you've done all of your analysis and your strategy, when you're putting the meat to the bones, now you're saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here are the outcomes that we're going to try to accomplish. And these are the tactics that we're going to be using and deploying to take us down the path of achieving those objectives. Yeah.
And just to add to what Paul, and I think everybody's kind of touched on it, but the buyer's journey or customer journey, one of the best frameworks I've come across, and you guys are well aware of this one, but the John Jantz from Duct Tape Marketing created something called the marketing hourglass. And the philosophy behind it is that, you have know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer. And so what's cool about the hourglass is it is a cycle, but it's a little bit different in that you need to put effort into all these areas. But one of the things I really, really like about this framework is that often businesses will get focused on what do I need to do at each stage to motivate somebody through their journey. And that's super, super important. But what I thought is really fascinating on his framework is that it's, what are people looking for at each stage? What type of decision are they making? And then that helps you lead into the part where you're creating the strategies and the motivations to move people through those micro decisions of know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer, right? And I think that's a really cool framework for businesses to work through. It's not always easy. And that's where, a marketing guide can come in really helpful to help them through that process. You guys led with that segue. You talked a little bit about how we're going to talk about the practical applications of marketing strategy. So let's jump into that. So how can a small business practically, so they've got a marketing strategy now, how can they practically apply that strategy? And I'll start with you, Jeff.
Okay. So yeah, I think of course first is develop the strategy, right? And then start to translate that into a plan or a blueprint, if you will, to consistently execute it. Now, I do want to be a little bit careful here. I mentioned, analysis paralysis earlier, and related to that is, don't just keep planning and planning and planning and planning and planning and never doing, right? We don't want to get caught up in getting it perfect before we try and start executing, because two things, right? The old saying, I think it goes something like, great is the enemy of good, or maybe great is the enemy of good enough. It doesn't have to be great. It's got to be good enough to get you started and get the job done and get you going. And then that leads into the second aspect of it, which is there's going to be a learning curve, right? As you start to execute, things are going to change. You're going to get new information. Maybe the marketplace is going to change. Maybe there's something going on in the world that throws a curveball into the situation. So it needs to be flexible and adaptable. But that also says it doesn't have to be cast in concrete from the very beginning. So I think there's that aspect of it. But once you have that plan or blueprint, and there are folks who advocate looking out 3 years, 5 years, and developing very detailed plans. I think there is a place for some of that at a high level, but that's not where we are day to day with marketing, because things are changing so fast, especially with AI. But once you have that kind of sense of where you're going to go, how you're going to get there, then you can start bringing in the ongoing activities and integrating it. And you can align your strategy to getting all the pieces in place that need to have it done, getting the right tools in place to measure things, getting the right ad platforms involved. And then, if you're doing campaigns to do outreach to prior customers maybe you've lost touch with, you can start doing that. But you start bringing in all the pieces and all the assets you have available, if you will, to executing. Part of the strategy is to look at your existing customers and kind of see where they are and what you can learn from them. And I think, that also continues on an ongoing basis. You can run questions and surveys and look at your metrics. Are we reaching the people we want to reach? But really kind of approach everything as, I think Ken hit it earlier, trying to solve a problem. So solve people's problems, figure out the right places to put the tactics out there to do it, and then start small, work your way up, build in, experiment. Don't go to $10,000 a month ad spend on day one. First off, the platform is going to be confused and not know what to do with it. But you can start off with a lower ad spend, work your way up as you get some learning, dial things in and optimize it. And then just tie it all together with the metrics, tie it all together with making sure that all the tactics are supporting each other, and you're looking at how it's going along the way. I think there's more to that. I want to not just keep talking, let Paul jump in, let Ken jump in. But I think, practically it's comes down to just steal Nike's line, just do it. You start and work your way in.
Yeah. And a similar phrase you mentioned, great is the enemy of good. One of my favorite authors, John Acuff, he wrote, he coined, perfect is the enemy of done. And I think that's so true from a marketing perspective as well. And I'm so sorry. I don't know. So Paul, it's over to you.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things is, and this kind of, it goes back to strategy, but are they doing anything now? Do they, and is what they're doing correct or incorrect? And when you're going through your strategy, can you integrate with the things they are doing now? Can you improve them? And, problem solving, developing your messages. Okay, that's, you've gone through your strategy. Here's how we're going to differentiate you. So now how do we put that into our messaging? How do we communicate that? And, something, Jeff said about analysis paralysis, we see this all the time when we're building websites, that they have a website that completely sucks, but they don't want to send the new website live because it's not perfect. It's like, well, it's a hell of a lot better than the website you have now. So let's get that website live. it's not like a one and done thing. You can always make changes, but it's better than what you have now. And I think that goes back to, what are you doing now from a marketing perspective, and can the strategy that we just went through improve that? And are there things that you're doing that you need to stop doing? Like maybe you're spending a lot of time on a social media platform where your potential customers just aren't there. So stop doing that. So I think, and there's a lot of other things, but I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but I think that's one of the biggest things that I would say is, don't, like Jeff said, don't let perfection get in the way of moving forward.
That's awesome. Ken, what about you?
Well, to me, you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have a system, it's not going to do you any good. So I'm going to go back to classic systems analysis and talk about function, input, output, control, and mechanism. So you got to pick the functions that you're going to be doing. That these are often, kind of roughly translated to tactics, or a series of steps within it to execute a tactic. The inputs, what is going to be feeding that? Is it going to be getting pictures from projects so that you can write project portfolio write-ups with local SEO content and how you solved a customer's problem on a website? Are you getting those pictures? We can't magically make those happen, as marketers. Somebody's got to be responsible for getting those pictures. What's the output? The output is a well-optimized SEO, local SEO project description that is designed to engage the reader, but also help with SEO purposes. How do you do that? What policies or practices or procedures do you have in place to do that? And so that's the control. And then the mechanism is, what tools do you need to be able to do that? So you got to put all of these things together. And when people look at the requirements to build a marketing infrastructure, they are not insignificant in this day and age. I mean, we're talking about we've all talked about the ultimate value in many scenarios, if not most scenarios, is an omni-channel approach. And an omni-channel approach requires a pretty substantial investment in the mechanisms, the infrastructure, to be able to power everything that you're doing. You need to have repeatable, managed, controlled processes so that you're producing quality output from the inputs that you're putting in. So I think you got to think about systems analysis. The other thing is, you've got short-term and long-term things that you can do. So as an example, we've talked about websites. If you decide that through your marketing strategy work that an SEO website is critical to the success of your business to help you achieve the growth goals that you want, at the price point that you want to pay. Okay, that's going to take that's just not going to magically happen, right? I mean, we all kind of operate, around content sprints where, we're looking at a quarter devoted to creating content specifically to help a part of the business rank the way we want it to. And so while that quarterly sprint is going on to build out the content that you need to win the SEO battles that you're going to be facing, in the short term, you can fire up a landing page. You can drive traffic to it from your traffic store product of choice, whether it's Google ads, Facebook ads, whatever matches, the research that you've done to help you get in front of the ideal customers at the most cost-effective way, to drive that short-term activity. So you're working, both in the short term and in the long term to accomplish what you're trying to do. The final thing I'll say is, without having this stuff all laid out in a plan, Ian, you've been waiting for it, you're going to lose the force multiplication opportunities.
Absolutely.
That are out there. It's all got to be executed in concert with one another And I use the word concert specifically because a concert is an orchestration, again, another word of choice, to pull things together to get them to produce a better outcome through the controlled, repeatable managed systems that you have, and deliver that optimal output.
Yeah. I love it that you worked in the term force multiplier. I think this was implied in all of what you guys said, but I just wanted to kind of pull the thread out a little bit, just because I see businesses getting hung up on this one a lot, and that's accountability. You need to have really clear accountability of who's doing what, when it's being done, how you're measuring their success. And I would even say, because this comes up a lot where, a dental practice or a business will have a receptionist, a VA, whatever it is, somebody that's working in the business. And they'll say, actually, they've got a little extra time. They can do our social posting. They can do our review requests and responses. They can do some, maybe they could even write some blog posts. But truthfully, if the business owner took a step back and they thought through that, is that person, first of all, specifically skilled to do those things? Probably not. Can they sustainably and effectively deliver those services to the business? Probably not. So you really need to figure that out, right? And the same question arises a lot when businesses have a multi-vendor marketing approach where they've got a social media person, a web person, an SEO person, an ads person, right? Who's cohesively bringing those all together, and who's ultimately responsible for the goal achievement that you've set out in your plan?
Yeah. We're building many little factories, right? I mean, the goal is to produce output that will help drive the outcomes that we want. And so, if you want to put yourself in the situation where you have to review every single blog post that's written before it's published, you're stopping the flow of the manufacturing process. Part of SEO is production. It's got to be production of the right stuff, but you've got to produce content and deliver it in a timely manner. And if you've got roadblocks or obstacles, whether intentional or not, you're compromising the execution of the really, think of it, if you're used to supply chain, think of it that way. You're interrupting the flow of the supply chain. And we all know how important supply chains can be to businesses. So likewise, the production of the marketing assets and outcomes or outputs to deliver the outcomes that you want, if you put stuff in the way and you put roadblocks, or you're not, like you said, Ian, if you're not having the accountability to have somebody manage and remove those roadblocks, because they're going to happen, then you're not going to have the optimal production that you want.
Yeah. And I think this leads, I know we're getting up close to the top of the hour, but I wanted to cover this topic because I think it's so important. And I think where you left off there, Ken, leads nicely into it. But what are the common pitfalls in marketing without a clear strategy, and how can they be avoided? And maybe this is more anecdotal from your guys' experience, but Jeff, why don't you start us off? Like, what are some of the pitfalls if as a business you don't have a strategy?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and I've seen this several times to the point that in our business, we actively discourage people from asking us just to run one tactic. They come without a tactic. They have no strategy, and then they expect results, and it just doesn't work. And the anecdotal case that I have is a drop shipper of a manufacturer. I won't say what product, but they had a drop shipping arrangement. They were going to do an e-commerce store, so where they're essentially taking orders and then arranging drop shipping and then making money off the arbitrage. And they just wanted us to run Google Ads, and we told them they needed work on their website. They needed better landing pages. They needed content that kind of solved the problem. To Ken's point, addresses the problem, the pains that people have. And they said, okay, we got that covered. Just run the ads. And then after 2 months of running ads, they said, well, we're spending a lot of money on ads. How come we're not getting any sales? I said, well, the ads have got a 10% click-through rate, which was huge.
That is huge.
I mean, typical is like 3 to 5, maybe. I said, the ads are doing their job. They're taking traffic to your website. Now, if you're not getting sales, have you made the changes we recommended on the website? Have you built the landing page? No. That's a prime example right there, right? If you dive into tactics and you haven't mapped out all the moving parts and how they work together and how they support that buyer's journey and moving people from just finding out about you to actually getting to a sale because they were missing that gap in between, that educated and informed that went through the like and trust, you're just going to waste resources. I think, another one that we see is inconsistent messaging, or especially if the messaging is all about us. The joke is, all right, enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me? Right? Your website, your messaging, it can't be all about you. It's got to be about your buyer, your ideal client, your customer, and what they're looking for and how you're going to solve it. And that's part of strategy, right? Is defining that. So the messaging falls out of the strategy. And if you're just, well, let's try this and see if it works. Let's try that and see if it works. You're going to wind up with a very fragmented messaging. People are going to look at your business guy. I don't know what they do, right? I don't know who they're trying to serve. It's just a mess. So I think those are some pitfalls. And then I mentioned earlier, things change, and not recognizing that things change and keeping up with it. So when you are implementing the marketing machine, as Ken talked about it, the orchestra and playing in tune, if one of the instruments goes out of tune, you need to hear it. You need to know about it. And you only get that by monitoring and looking at trends, looking at what's going on in the world. And it's not just, is this month better or worse than last month? Sometimes trends are too short. People look at a very narrow focus. You need to look at this quarter compared to last quarter, this quarter compared to last quarter, the same quarter last year, because there are seasonal trends. Yeah. There's a whole lot of reasons why things can change. You got to do a little critical thinking. So I think those are some pitfalls. There are more, but I want to give Paul a chance to chime in, Ken a chance to chime in too, since we're coming up on the hour.
I'll make you guys arm wrestle for who goes next. Go.
Go for it, Paul.
But Ken.
Yeah, so let's throw Paul under the bus.
Well, I think something Jeff mentioned is, and it's wasting resources. Jeff talked about Google Ads and that one strategy. I'm going to say not understanding your competitive marketplace, and that goes back to strategy. And this is coming off what Jeff said, is that if your competitors are spending $3,000 a month, and I said this before, on Google Ads, and you have a $500 a month budget, don't bother, because you're not going to get results. And that's the other thing, is how competitive is your marketplace? Not understanding that, not understanding how much you need to spend on a particular marketing channel, whatever it may be. And the other thing I would say is that the shiny object syndrome. Oh, hey, look at this, look at this. We should do this, we should do that. Well, no, you need to focus on what's going to work best for your business. And that goes back to strategy. That's why strategy is so important. And not targeting correctly. A lot of businesses, they just want to throw stuff out there and say, well, I want to cover this whole area. I want to market to this entire area. Well, if your core service is metal roofing, well, you better be marketing to people that are making, $150,000 a year. Metal roofing is not cheap. Okay. That is an expensive product. And if that's the product or the service that you want to be focusing on, then you need to make sure that you're targeting people that can actually afford that. And I think a lot of times that businesses get in that the more people I can reach, the better results I'll get. And that's not necessarily the case.
Great points. What about you, Ken?
Two things, leaking leads and either lack of response or not speedy response. I think, if you don't have a system in place that's defined by strategy, you're going to leak a bunch of leads, and you're paying a lot of money to get those leads. It could be an SEO, it could be Google Ads, it could be numerous different sources that are coming in. You work hard to get those. You need to make sure that you're capturing them and then responding to them quickly. Speed of response is critical. We've talked about it before. It gets you out of off the hamster wheel of running around, trying to compete on price all the time. And it's going to improve your close rates. So those are huge gaps that I see. Jeff, I like what you said. A single tactic, is that's a hobby. It's not really marketing. And so how do you if you run Google Ads, you alluded to it, but your customer didn't execute on it. Okay, running Google Ads, that's one tactic. Building quality landing pages that convert, another tactic. Having a marketing automation system to nurture and follow up with people so that when they do get a lead, they move them through, some type of a buyer's journey to the point where they're making a buying decision through email marketing or remarketing to them to get them to come back onto your website. Now you're starting to put some pieces together, and it's the lack of putting the right pieces together. You may be doing, like realtors, I see them do this all the time, and it drives me nuts. I know that they have the best intentions, and but they're being told you gotta get a billboard, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta run Facebook ads, you gotta be doing whatever, and you go into networking events and chamber functions and stuff like that. Okay, they're all done as individual things. So you're doing a lot of marketing, but you're not bringing it in to be cohesive so that it can amplify. And Ian, what's the word?
Force multiplication.
There you go. So that's really, when you don't give yourself the opportunity for force multiplication, you're really missing the boat.
Yeah.
So if I could add one more
go ahead,
real
Jeff.
quick thing, and I know we're coming up on time. I don't know if you want to hold the last question, Ian, until maybe another show even, but
yeah, we'll
another pitfall is expecting one person to do everything. And I think we hit on this a little bit earlier, but it takes a team. We did a show a couple back on building the perfect team, and there's so many roles in marketing that I think a pitfall is, well, I'm going to have, my friend's daughter is good at social media, she's going to run my marketing. There is a team of people involved to implement marketing. I think a common pitfall is expecting one person, especially a junior person, to do it all.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff. I would also add, and I have kind of two connecting thoughts, and one is that without strategy, you open yourself up to believing that marketing doesn't work. Specific tactics don't work. Marketing as a whole doesn't work. I've run into many people who have given up on different marketing tactics or strategies because they didn't have an overarching strategy. They didn't define their core message, right? They didn't go through the hard work that prepares individual tactics to be successful. But then the connecting thought is just what you were talking about, Ken, where when you get a system, the whole becomes stronger than the parts, and the results become exponentially bigger than the individual parts could ever deliver. So when you get your social media working together with your SEO, with your website, with your outbound messaging, right? Like all of this stuff combines to become a powerhouse of marketing rather than squeaky little individual wheels trying to do what they do. Or I always have it was probably on like the Ed Sullivan show or something, where the guys have the poles with the plates and they're spinning all the plates, and it's impossible to do, right? Maybe 1 in a million people can do that for a little while, but those plates start following eventually. And I see businesses trying to do that a lot, right? Keep those plates up, and it doesn't work well.
And if you're a business and you're already investing, tens of thousands of dollars a year in doing marketing things, chances are you can actually spend less money and get better results if you do marketing strategy and you integrate what you're doing so that it's working in conjunction with one another. And a lot of people don't necessarily believe that, but it's honestly the truth. I mean, so it's worth taking a little bit of a step back. It doesn't mean you have to shut down your public face to the world. Marketing strategy does not prohibit you from not doing any other marketing or advertising. Just take a step back, dial it in, and you're going to get a whole lot better results.
Think of marketing strategy as synergism, where the sum is greater than the parts.
And with that, we're going to wrap things up because I know we've gone a little bit over time, but we have some great sayings. But thank you to our listeners and viewers for spending some time with us. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of this. If you need help with your marketing strategy, reach out to one of our marketing guides. All of us can help you develop a marketing strategy and implement that marketing strategy for you. And until next week, guys, keep calm and market on.